PNR Networks is a member of Patreon. Show your love for our shows by joining our ongoing fundraising campaign and get some fantastic perks in return. Check it out and become a Patreon sponsor. You can sign up at patreon.com, patreon.com/PNR Networks. And thanks for your support.
This podcast is a member of the Blueberry Network. Blueberry. No E's. That's Blueberry, BLUBRRY.com. Blueberry.com.
This podcast is a proud member of the Lamb Podcasting Network. Find the network at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Okay, we've got the mic set up and the computer set up and everything's set up and he's not here.
Here we go.
What is that?
This is our basket of horror tools.
I am almost afraid to ask, what's in there, hon?
Stuff to protect us from everything that's in the horror movies from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Garlic.
Ew.
Holy water.
Don't hand that to me.
Rolling pin.
Are we making a pizza? What are you doing?
Fish sauce. I don't know how that got in there. Oh, of course. You got to have flashlight. And silver bullets.
And
a steak.
What are we going to do with this?
Just in case, you know.
We're going to defend ourselves against Dracula with a ribeye? Let me pack this. You get the show started.
It's Horror Week as we head out into the open air for more of the summer. Plus, we've got it happens to fall this week anyway, but we also have an outstanding tribute to the late George Romero. We will have a review of Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets. We will have an overview of Comic-Con, not Comic Can.
Well, Comic-Con is in the cans.
Almost, yeah, as we're recording this. And a lot more. I'm T.C. Cookham.
I'm Kim Brown.
And we're on the road once again.
For Subject Cinema's Drive-In Summer, and you forgot to pack the final girl. You dimwit.
Good evening, folks, and a hearty welcome to our drive-in theater.
Subject Cinema.
Drive-in summer.
T.C. Cookham and Kim Brown. Subject Cinema.
Drive-in summer.
Couldn't pack the final girl, she'd suffocate.
Oh.
We don't want that to happen.
No, not before the movie's over. We need somebody to throw at the killer while we run.
Right. No, we don't want Mrs. Voorhees coming after us. We're going to give her a sacrificial lamb or something.
That's true.
Welcome to Subject Cinema's Drive-In Summer. I'm T.C. Cookham.
Always planning ahead. I'm Kim Brown.
Subject Cinema number 575. Wow. Another new milestone.
Woohoo.
Day and date, July 23rd, 2017. And this week we lost horror icon George Romero right as I was editing the show last week. So we didn't get it in, but we're going to talk about his movies and also the general horror genre this week, as well as a few other things. How was your week? Other than hot. It was hot this week.
It was very hot in New England this week. It was, one of those New England weeks where it's like, it's hot, it's sticky, you go outside, you leave a nice air-conditioned office and you go outside and all of a sudden you're gasping for air and the air is all wet and sticky and nasty and you're like, let me back in! And you're like, no, wait, work is in there. I don't care, let me back in!
Yeah, I know. I don't know how that feels. Ugh.
Yeah. As TC mentioned, unfortunately this week we lost one of horror's icons in the fact that George Romero passed away, which I have to be honest, when I saw that, I was really sad.
Yeah, me too.
I was really like, Damn. That really hurts.
Yeah, it does.
Wow.
He was a pioneer of the modern horror film, and along with a few others that we'll talk about when we get to our microfocus. But we'll also have we've never really looked at Night of the Living Dead, so we'll do that today. And we'll also have a DEJAVU review from 8 years ago.
Wow.
Almost 8 years ago, of a great version of the film called Night of the Living Dead Reanimated. If you've never seen it, you should.
That was actually the first time you ever saw it.
I saw that one first, yeah. And now we just watched it again the other night, and it was
the original.
The
not
original,
the
yeah, the original.
one, yeah.
And it's like, wow. She finds it a lot more scary than I do.
I do, which is really weird.
Although I'm kind of grossed out when we both sit around watching them go around the yard in that one scene, and we're both sitting there going nom 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 nom.
I don't know if that's injecting humor into things or we're just a couple of sick beeps. I'm not really sure.
I would say both of them.
Yay!
And in that note, let's head into Microfocus, and we'll take a look at the days of the outdoor cinema's biggest attraction of all, over time, I think, the horror film. Subject Cinema Microfocus. Horror films. Now, what do you think of the first thing when you think of a horror film? You think of supernatural stuff.
I do. If you ask me my opinion if you told me to encapsulate a horror film in one shot, it would probably be one of the shots of Bela Lugosi as Dracula.
Okay. According to Wikipedia, a horror film is a movie that seeks to elicit a physiological reaction, such as an elevated heartbeat, through the years of fear and shocking one's audiences. Inspired by literature from authors like Edgar Allan Poe, Bram Stoker, and Mary Shelley, the horror genre has existed for more than a century. The macabre and the supernatural are frequent themes. Horror may also overlap into the fantasy, supernatural fiction, and thriller genres. We kind of diverse from that because you don't believe it's horror if there's no supernatural element.
That's just my take on it, and I admit it's mine. And if you agree with me, you're welcome to it. If you don't agree with me, that's your bicycle. You can ride it wherever you want.
Despite the fact that it says horror of Party Beach, it's not really horror. That's science fiction.
I would consider that you can have science fiction horror. You can have science fiction / horror.
Okay.
But if you take a film like Psycho and people say that's a horror movie, I'm like, no, it's not.
People call Jaws a horror movie either, which it is not.
No, it's not.
No.
Psycho is not a horror movie. In my opinion, something is a horror movie if it has a supernatural element to it. Something involving the occult. Not specifically magic, but something monstrous, something fantastic, something out there, for lack of a better term. That's why I don't consider Psycho a horror movie. Psycho is a thriller, but it's not, in my opinion, it's not a horror movie.
Right.
Some people would even argue something like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a horror movie. And I would, by my own guidelines, I'm still like, no, it's not.
Right.
Because while those actions are horrible and they're terrifying and they're gross and they're
terrible,
nasty, and the whole thing, they're being done by people. People who are not like supernaturally charged up with some kind of malevolent, evil, demonic energy, whatever.
Right.
They're people.
Okay.
So
that makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, if you look at a film, something like The Exorcist, that's definitely a horror movie.
Right.
Because you have a supernatural overtone with the whole idea of demonic possession, whether or not you actually are a believer of the faith where demons are real. I mean, you might be a person that's like, well, I don't believe in all that.
Right.
Well, fine, don't. If you don't want to, don't.
The first major horror film to come out in theaters was Edison Studios' 1910 production of Frankenstein, the first of many.
Yes.
But most people acknowledge as the first official horror film, Germany's The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Never have been able to pronounce that. From 1920. And
I've heard
also,
Caligari and Caligari, so I think it depends.
And also Nosferatu from 1922. Both silent films made in the German during Germany during the Weimar Republic,
right?
Which brought some of the best German cinema of all time. So
well,
it's like,
when you think about the fact that even before there were movies, before movies existed, there's always been horror. There has always been that fear that man has had since all the way back when men were living in caves. That fear of what's out there in the dark. That thing that you can't see, but you know is there, and you know that you're watching it, and it's watching you.
Right.
And that's something that mankind has brought up through oral history, through written history. So it's natural that once celluloid came along and films, that horror became something that instantly was there. Because people, and whether people want to admit it to themselves or not, people like to be scared. Now, what level you like to be scared, that's an individual thing. Your mileage may vary.
I think the first level of horror, as far as American films go, although there were some made in the silent era, the first to coin them as horror films were the Universal Monsters series, starting with Dracula in 1931, Frankenstein 1931, and also blending some stuff that wouldn't really be considered horror, but thrillers into it, like The Invisible Man and The Mummy and Wolfman, all part of the Universal Monsters.
I agree with that, but I do think that you do have to go back a tiny bit into the silence, because you have...
I said there were some in the silence, but I'm talking about the first major... The word horror film was not associated with films until Dracula.
No, that is true.
Which is what I'm saying.
Really kind of a shame when you look back at some of the silent films, especially films like The Phantom of the Opera, with that one reveal scene, which people
That's a classic.
flipped out when that scene was done.
Yeah, but let's face it, your sister looked at that and said, "Why isn't there any sound?"
Yeah. I'm watching the silent version of The Phantom of the Opera, and my sister walks in the room. Why isn't there any noise? What's wrong with the movie? I'm like, it's a silent movie. Go away. But like you mentioned, the term horror and the horror film really started to gain legs, however many it had, in the 30s and 40s. When you look at a film like Dracula from 1931, Todd Browning's Dracula, which is an amazing film, although now that we've seen both of them, I do prefer the Mexican version, to be perfectly honest.
Do you prefer the way it was staged? You still prefer Bella?
I prefer the way it was staged, yes, but yes, to me, Bella is Dracula. I mean, no offense to the late Christopher Lee, who was amazing, but... You look at Bela Lugosi's turn as Dracula, and it's so powerful and so mesmerizing, and you can't take your eyes off the screen. And it's really, really interesting watching the character and how the character of Dracula, which is one of the most performed on-screen characters ever. Dracula, Sherlock Holmes, and a few other characters are on like the very top of people who have performed that character from around the world. You look at Frankenstein, which to me is more of a tragic film than Dracula. Although I do kind of feel like both Dracula and Frankenstein have a problem that... I don't know what this says about the early horror films, and you might not agree with me on this, but do you feel like the weakest point of both Dracula and Frankenstein, in my opinion, is the endings?
Yes. I don't like the ending of Dracula because we don't get to see it.
No.
I didn't see Dracula until... just about a decade ago. I watched it for the first time when Kim bought the large sets that came out, and I sat down and watched it, and I love the film. It's an absolutely brilliant film. Even today, it stands up as a brilliant film, and yet the ending was very disappointing because I wanted to see Dracula get the stake through his heart, and instead it's just implied off camera.
Yeah.
And I don't like that. And I didn't like the way Frankenstein ended either because it was just kind of like left up. Did he make it? Did he not make it?
Well, my big problem with the end of Frankenstein is the fact that, you have the big climactic battle at the windmill, and, Baron Frankenstein gets tossed off the windmill by the monster, then everybody starts throwing torches at the windmill, which burns the windmill down. Everybody assumes the monster's dead. And we get this whole tacked-on epilogue ending of Henry and Elizabeth's wedding stuff. I'm like, I don't care. I'm sorry. I realize that makes me sound horribly cold, but I'm like, I don't care about these characters. These are not the focal point of the movie for me. What happened to the monster? It's like, but that's just me. And I never was afraid of the Frankenstein monster. I always felt sorry for him because he didn't ask for that. He didn't ask to be born and feared and persecuted and hunted like that. But that's me.
Horror films changed over the years. They would become, you would got a lot of stuff in the 50s and 60s that were very bland, but they had some supernatural elements. Movies like House of Wax with Vincent Price and a few other films that Vincent Price did, plus practically everything that Karloff and Bela Lugosi did.
Well, the thing about
Peter Lorre, did.
The thing about horror movies in the 50s and 60s was that, ironically, or maybe not ironically, what killed the earlier monster movies was what was going on outside of the cinemas. World War II and all of the things that happened in the real world. People saw that whatever you put on the screen, it paled to what human beings could do to each other. And the whole idea was people just didn't want these fantastic monsters anymore. They didn't want this kind of occult, supernatural monster stuff because they felt like, well, we're smarter than that now. And there were other things going on outside of the cinema that made its way into the cinema, and cinema had to change with the times.
Right.
So you got away from the gothic horror and went more into the science fiction / horror, portion, where you had a lot of films that were dealing with, the giant fill in the blank, terrorizes downtown Secaucus, or, whatever. And it was usually, the attack of the 50-foot, it was giant bugs.
Locusts all over the postcard of the Biltmore building in Chicago.
Yeah, you had giant locusts, you had giant spiders, you had giant people, you had giant rutabagas, you had giant,
No, we didn't have giant rutabagas. That's just silly.
I know.
That's like saying giant rabbits attack. Oh, yeah, that did happen.
Couple of more decades.
Neither
we're not there yet. And obviously, you can't talk about films from the 50s and talk about the whole idea of radiation being the big catalyst behind something going wrong without looking at Japan's masterpiece Gojira, which in turn spawned Godzilla King of the Monsters and 9 kabillion sequels.
Are Godzilla movies horror films? I don't think so. They're science fiction.
I would consider them science fiction with horror elements.
Even though there's no supernatural stuff? Actually, I suppose there is, because you've got the natives in Mothra that worship the moth god, so that's kind of a supernatural element, and going so on and so forth.
Going way down, you had one of the later Godzilla films where Godzilla is imbued with the souls of all of the people from Japan that died in World War II.
Yeah.
I mean, I realize that is esoteric and really kind of weird, but when you see Godzilla with these white, almost zombie-like eyes, it's scary as hell.
Yeah.
No. It really is.
The 1950s and 1960s, the American horror film genre kind of passed away, as you said. They were more interested in the giant monsters and stuff like that. And they were interested in making feel-good films in the recovery of World War II. But Britain stepped up. 2 studios in Britain became synonymous with horror films, Hammer Studios and Amicus Studios.
Yes.
And you are a huge fan of both of them.
I am. I admit that. The Hammer films, which took a lot, obviously the most famous thing that came out of Hammer were the Dracula films, and their interpretation of Dracula, played, for the most part, by the fantastic Christopher Lee, usually facing up against Dr. Van Helsing or a descendant of said, played by the amazing Peter Cushing. They did other films together, like their version of The Mummy, which, to be perfectly honest, I actually kind of like better than the Karloff version.
They also did The Hound of the Baskervilles together,
yes,
didn't they?
Did.
Yeah.
Yes, they did.
That was a really good version of that movie, too.
With Cushing as Sherlock Holmes and Christopher Lee as the Mansell and distressed Sir Henry Baskerville, which is just...
That's a term that wouldn't come up for 40 more years.
odd.
Stop that.
It's just odd.
Why, that he's not playing the bad guy?
No.
I'm saying that it's odd. That's why it's odd, because he's not playing the bad guy?
No, it's just odd thinking of Christopher Lee being the person that you have to save.
Well, yeah, but just like Vincent Price isn't playing a bad guy in The Bat, really.
Well, he's not a very nice man.
He's not well, no, he is. The only thing that he did was kill somebody in self-defense.
Well, yeah.
In the early part of the film.
Yeah.
And other than that, but he was just an average, small town doctor / scientist.
But if you look at a film like The Last Man on Earth, which was based on Richard Matheson's I Am Legend, he actually is the protagonist in that film.
That he turns out to be the bad guy at the end too.
According to the people who are now the ruling.
All a matter of perspective.
Who are now the ruling race. Of course, the 50s and the 60s were when the drive-ins really took off. So you had a lot of films that, while you had films that were frightening, the Hammer stuff is great. The Amicus stuff, a lot of people looked at Amicus as the poor man's Hammer, which I don't think is fair.
But you often have higher opinions of some of Amicus's anthology movies than you do of some of Hammer's stuff.
I do. Hammer didn't do a lot of anthology stuff.
No, I'm just saying overall on the Hammer stuff.
Well, I am a sucker for anthology films, and I love I love horror anthology films because they tap into two things that are very much part of my DNA: horror and short attention spans. Because I like one and I have the other one.
Just call her Doug.
And I admit that, and I'm, don't judge me. But, they did I enjoyed them. You had films like Asylum, Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror.
A lot of them have been on her Guilty Pleasures or underrated film lists over the years. Yeah.
And a lot of the films that wound up in drive-ins were... there were frightening films in there, let's face it. But there were also films that were just designed to get the girl to be all like, oh, I'm scared.
Let's go to 1962. 1962 was a seminal year in horror. This was the year a man named Herschel Gordon Lewis released a film? ?
That's not nice.
Called Blood Feast.
Yeah.
It was specifically designed to gross you out.
It worked.
And he became a gross out legend and somebody that played in drive-ins for the next 25 years.
Yeah.
With movies like...
Yeah, they gave him the title of the Godfather of Gore for a reason, with films that were part of the Blood trilogy, including Blood Feast, 2000 Maniacs, Color Me Blood Red. He was also involved with other exploitation films.
Yeah, he was.
Venus and Furs, Blast Off Girls, I think, was one of his as well.
I thought that was Abram. What's his name?
I'm not sure.
I want to say Herb Abrams, but that's wrong. That's wrestling.
But towards the end of the 60s, now obviously, as I mentioned before, movies change with the times. And by the end of the 60s, let's be honest and call it what it was, although I don't remember this because I was terribly small.
If even born yet.
The late 1960s, the world was a hot mess. You had, Vietnam...
You can't say that on the air.
Fine, the world was completely forked up.
Okay, there you go.
Everything was going to hell in a handbasket. You had Vietnam raging, you had civil rights riots in this country, you had Watergate, you had all these cases.
Well, Watergate was from the 70s, but yeah.
Well, you had the beginning of the distrust of the government, which would culminate in Watergate and people being like, "Screw you, we're done." You had the whole flower power movement. You had the generation gap. You had all these things that were going on, saying the world has gone nuts, and that was definitely typified by the films. And there were great examples of that you can pull out from the late 60s, showing that people really felt like these were the end times. I mean, capital E, capital T, and times.
Okay.
You know, with a film like 1968's Rosemary's Baby.
Okay.
Which is a film about a woman who gives birth to the spawn of the devil. I don't really see how you can get much more dark than that. And trust me...
There were a lot of those kind of movies around, too. I mean, Mystery Science Theater 3000 did several of them, including A Touch of Satan, which remains my all-time favorite worst. I won't watch it again.
I was going to say, that's the one movie he's like, he will never watch that movie again. And then a little film came out of Pennsylvania, of all places, called Night of the Living Dead. In 1968.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
And this film turned everything upside down, backwards, and sideways.
Despite being torn apart by the critics when it came out,
Surprise.
Especially by Roger Ebert, who saw it at a kiddie matinee, which I don't think the theaters even realized what it was. It would go on to become possibly the most influential horror film of all time, written and directed by the now sadly late George Romero.
Yeah.
So that's that was a turning point, and that gave us the new zombies.
It completely changed the zombie genre altogether, forever and ever and ever.
We actually talked about that last year, so you can go back and listen to a show from, I believe it was from August, where we talked about how Night of the Living Dead actually changed the entire landscape of zombies.
Right. The biggest change, obviously, besides the changes to zombies themselves, which I'll touch on in a minute, is the fact that this film, for the time, actually, the hell with that, even now, this film is incredibly difficult to watch if you are of a sensitive nature.
I'm a sensitive nature, and I don't have a problem with it. It's weird, because I wouldn't watch it for years. I'm not a horror fan. I don't like it. It gives me terrible nightmares sometimes. And especially if there's animals and crap involved.
Well,
I don't want to be there.
I can't watch stuff with animals in it. I flip out. You know that.
No, but I mean movies that were out like in the 70s, the ones with all the snakes and all the bugs and all. I don't go in for that. For some reason, I had no problem with Night of the Living Dead. I've seen it several times, and I love it. It's a great film.
Okay. It is a great film. But I definitely think if you're not ready for it, if you don't know what's coming, this film will knock you upside the head and really F with you.
We'll talk more about it in depth in the next segment.
I didn't see this film until I was a teenager. And
I didn't see it until I was in my 40s.
It messed me up for a night.
Yeah.
Now, I will be the first to admit, although I love horror movies, I suppose it would be accurate to actually say I kind of have a love-hate relationship with horror movies. I love horror movies, but then that night I'm going, why did I do that? It's like I have had movies that have flipped me out to the point where I've lost nights of sleep.
Yes,
probably,
ask him about Pet Sematary sometime.
Probably shaved off a couple of years off my life, and is probably the reason some of my hair has gone white. But
no, that just happens to be the fact that you are unfortunately getting older, like me.
Well, it beats the alternative.
It does. Yes.
When you go forward into the 70s and 80s, now obviously by the 70s and 80s, the drive-ins were a little bit on the wane when it comes to...
And sadly, a lot of them had turned to porn, but at this point, most of them, thankfully, were still running the horror films.
Which I still, just jumping on that for a second, I still don't understand how you could run a porno film on a big screen that can be seen.
We're not going to go into that.
But
so
anyway. A lot of... obviously, like I said, the whole pessimism of the 60s definitely bled over into the 70s, which kind of is interesting because the 70s people think of the 70s as the disco generation and the generation.
That's the late 70s.
And the polyester generation.
The early 70s brought what was known as the auteur horror films. Most of them came from a quartet of Italian directors in Mario Bava, Riccardo Freda, Antonio Margretti, and Dario Argentino. Bava, known best for Black Sunday, Argentino for Suspiria, which is now being remade for some reason.
Yeah.
And we've actually had the Suspiria radio trailer on the show a few times, and it's like, okay, why mess with something perfect? But this was the era of just Throw them together. The 70s and 80s. Throw it together. Kids will go see them and make money. They don't have to be good.
No.
I mean, we lucked across this terrific series of trailer discs from Montreal Film Studios. We have like 20 of them. And so many of these are just garbage. You have a whole series of movies that begin with the word don't.
Yeah.
Don't open the door. Don't answer the phone. Don't go in the basement.
Yeah.
Don't go in the closet. Don't come out of the closet. You know, I mean,
I
it's
don't
like,
think that was a
that
horror
wasn't one of
movie.
them. Okay. Don't tell your children to play with matches. You know,
Don't wear white after Labor Day. You
right.
know, stuff like that.
All these terrible horror movies that I'm sitting there laughing myself sick just because of the whole one thing works. This is where sequel mania came in. Everybody's going to try it.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened in 1978. Halloween hit in 1978, which is a thriller until the last 5 minutes when it becomes a horror film.
Yes.
And I saw for the first time just 2 years ago and loved it. But Halloween begat Friday the 13th, and from that point on, forget it.
Which is another example.
Forget it. They're all dead teenager movies of all shapes and sizes.
Friday the 13th is another example of a film that I consider a thriller until the last 5 minutes.
That's what I said. They're both that way.
And then it becomes a horror movie, and it stays
because they both end up with
movie.
a supernatural at the end of the movie.
Personally, I think Halloween did it better, but that's
Halloween's a fabulous movie. I thought it was suspenseful. It was okay when it came to the acting, but the John Carpenter score and the John's directing on it makes it a classic. Friday the 13th, I've seen 2 or 3 times, mostly because Betsy Palmer really just is so over the top as Mrs. Voorhees that it's worth watching, pointing, and laughing. But I also love the scene where Kevin Bacon gets the arrow up through the bottom of the bed. That was his first major role. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
But
the 70s,
New Year's Evil and Terror Train and Prom Night, screw you.
The late 70s into the 80s brought about 2 things that occasionally would go together, didn't always have to, but usually did. The dead teenager film and the holiday tie-in film. You know, as you mentioned, there's New Year's.
There have been so many holiday
New Year's
tie-in
Evil.
films.
There have been several films based around Christmas or specifically around some homicidal psychopath in a Santa Claus suit. One of them being a film called Silent Night, Deadly Night, which I remember being...
Which they did 4 sequels to.
Yes. I remember being a young girl and, just doing the usual young girl things, playing with toys and reading and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I remember hearing adults just flipping their beep about this film.
Yeah.
And the problem was, even as a young child, it was like, I heard them all being all pearl clutching and, think of the children.
Right.
And, my first thing was, ooh, I want to see this.
Of course you do.
This is pissing off Mom and Dad. I gotta go.
I mean, let's face it. Of all the holidays on the calendar, the only ones that haven't had horror films based on them really are 4th of July, that I'm aware of. Easter, unless you consider The Passion of the Christ a horror film, which some people do.
They do?
Well, because of all the blood and stuff, and they consider it very difficult to get through.
Well, yeah.
Thanksgiving and Arbor Day. Are we gonna? Where are we gonna have an Arbor Day killer or something? You know,
could argue The Happening.
Oh, well, okay. All
Night
right. That's fair enough.
And does Arbor Day even exist anymore?
Yes.
I thought that Earth Day.
What about Earth Day? Earth Day's another one.
I thought Earth Day kind of like...
Well, it kind of supplanted it, but Arbor Day is still there. What about an Earth Day slasher film?
Don't give people ideas. And there actually have been Thanksgiving...
President's Day.
Stop it.
No, President's Day. A slasher dressed as a different president with every teenager he kills.
Okay, if anybody makes that movie...
I'm getting the death eyes now.
No, seriously, if anybody makes that movie, you heard the idea here first, and we want to get paid. But you bring up Thanksgiving and you're being flip about it, but actually in one of the faux trailers in the Grindhouse movies, that was one of the trailers, was a killer turkey in a Thanksgiving...
They actually have made a couple of those animated things. And I forget what they're called, but they're with animated turkeys that kill people. There's 3 of them. Thanksgiving something. I can't remember what they are. We've never gotten around to watching them. They're supposed to be incredibly bloody and incredibly funny at the same time. But I'm like, okay. Thanksgiving. That's it. Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
That's what it is. There's also, we're going to run over if we don't wrap this up, but the horror genre has changed so many times, and there continues to be, even into this day, the extremely graphic stuff. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre in 1974 or 75 ushered in another wave of the Herschel Gordon Lewis type stuff, and that continues to happen. Right now, it's the Saw films and and Hostel that were
the whole torture porn thing.
Stuff that were really huge.
And if you're into that, fine. I'm just not.
Yeah, I'm not either.
And
I've seen most of Hostel. I was not terribly thrilled with it.
I'm just kind of. I guess my thing is I'm like, if that's your idea of a great movie for a date, you might want to see somebody. Whether it's a psychiatrist.
Well, it's a better date movie than An Inconvenient Truth.
or the Brown Bunny. Or the Human Centipede. But obviously, and of course, everything old is new again.
Step all over my joke. I don't care.
Sorry. There have been several remakes of horror films. Gus Van Sant did a remake of Psycho. Skip it.
Which isn't a horror film.
No, it's a thriller. There was the remake of Friday the 13th in 2009. There was the remake of My Bloody Valentine in 2009. Right. There have been remakes. Like you mentioned, they're going to be doing a remake of Suspiria.
There's another reboot of Friday the 13th coming, too.
There was a remake of The Omen a few years back in 2006.
There have been a number of directors that have really been associated with it a lot lately, most notably Rob Zombie, jumping from music to behind the camera with remakes of Halloween and a number of other things.
Halloween,
he's done well with it.
Devil's Rejects, House of a Thousand Corpses.
He's done well with it. Wes Craven was doing it until he passed away a couple years ago. And there's been so many different, and some of the bigger people have gotten started with horror films too, like Peter Jackson and Paul W.S. Anderson, although I really don't consider Event Horizon a horror film, but a lot of people do.
I would definitely call that science fiction tinged with horror.
Right.
Like Alien. To me, Alien is a science fiction horror movie. That's a perfect example of a science fiction horror movie. Because it's people being stalked by a monster, but instead of being stalked by a monster in a cabin or the woods or whatever, they're on a spaceship. But it's the same idea. Right. Besides the fact that it's got a strong female protagonist, and it took us how long to get there?
A lot of horror films of recent years have been really critically acclaimed. Joel Edgerton has done a couple of them as a director-writer. And there's also the Australian film The Babadook, which got rave reviews a couple years ago.
Yep.
It changes with every decade, with every other year.
Yeah.
And it's something that you have to be looking at. And they are still very popular with the drive-in crowd.
Yep. And you've got the whole idea of films they're horror movies, but they're sort of also taking the mick a little bit, where they're kind of smirking at the camera. The Scream films definitely fall into that category.
They've never successfully made a parody of the Dead Teenager movie, so they've tried a number of times, and they just haven't been funny. There was something called Student Bodies in 1981.
No, that was terrible.
That was terrible.
Oh.
There was the Saturday the 14th and Pandemonium, which were both terrible.
Yeah.
And
the Scary Movie franchise, which is not going away.
It did well at first, but it doesn't really click. So horror films are your taste, whether you like the really bloody ones like the Bava or Herschel Gordon Lewis, or you like the more psychological ones like Halloween or whatever. It's your taste. We'd love to know what you think of the horror genre. And we're going to go pay tribute to the man who helped create the modern horror film next with our review in Attack of the Movies of Night of the Living Dead.
When Subject Cinema returns.
Subject Cinema. Drive in summer.
Want to know what new films are coming out this weekend? Hi, I'm T.C. Kirkham of Subject Cinema, inviting you to check out 3 Minute Weekend, our weekly roundup of all the new films hitting U.S. theaters each weekend. We've got the 411 on all the new blockbusters, indies, and video-on-demand choices for you each week. 3 Minute Weekend, every Friday morning from Subject Cinema and eCinema1.com, a PNRNetworks podcast powered by Libsyn. Subscribe on iTunes or your favorite podcast service. Subject Cinema's Drive-In Summer is co-presented by Going Attractions, the definitive story of the American drive-in, from director April Wright. You can check it out right now on Amazon Prime or order the DVD at goingattractions.com.
Going Attractions, the definitive story of the American drive-in movie. A new documentary available now on DVD. The collector's edition is loaded with special features. You can get Going Attractions in your snack bar now.
Don't forget to subscribe to Subject Cinema on iTunes. Click on the iTunes link on our sidebar or search for Subject Cinema on iTunes. Once you're there, click subscribe. It's that easy. And don't forget to leave us a comment on our iTunes page and tell everyone what you think of Subject Cinema too.
Subject Cinema. Drive-In Summer.
Is the next step the transplantation of the human brain?
The giant locusts have reached the Chicago South Side and nearby suburbs.
Flag on the moon. How did it get there? That bird is extraterrestrial.
Now that's ridiculous, Eulabelle.
Jerry just tried to kill me twice in the last 5 minutes.
Because all Eulabers are idiots. There are eyewitness accounts which state that monster scorpions have swarmed around the wreckage.
Movies.
Welcome to a night of total terror. Night of the living dead, the dead who live on living flesh. The dead whose haunted souls hunt the living whose bodies are the only food for these.
George Romero passed away on July 16th, 2017. He was 77 years old.
We're not worthy.
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 And you will be missed, sir.
Yes.
Something terribly.
Yes. He was one of the few people that I think... You hear the word icon tossed around a lot. I think he was one of the few people that actually the term icon isn't enough.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you consider...
He's up there with a very select few that would include Stan Lee,
Bob
Kane, Fred Rogers, and a few other people that you just don't have any... There's nobody
They're
there.
peerless.
Yeah. Jack Kirby.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Whose 100th birthday was over the weekend.
And Gene Roddenberry.
Yeah.
George gave the world a lot of, I don't know if I'd use the word pleasure, but he certainly fired a lot.
I think you would, yes, I do.
Like I mentioned before, people love being scared, so George wrote a love letter that was soaked in blood and entrails that debuted on October 1st of 1968, a little film not even 100 minutes long that changed the course of film history, and I am not using hyperbole when I say that.
No, you're not. It is Night of the Living Dead. Give us the rundown of the film.
Okay. Night of the Living Dead begins in a cemetery. Well, on a drive to a cemetery. But it's not your typical horror movie cemetery. There's no creaky, tilty gravestones, and it's not, pouring rain, and it's not even nighttime. It's still daylight when the Blair siblings, Barbara and Johnny, drive out to a cemetery to pay their respects to their father's grave. While they're out there, and Johnny's being a bit of a pain in the ass, Barbara...
As older brothers tend to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The time-honored traditional, I'm the older sibling, so I'm going to be a jerk.
Although not without affection.
Some of us never got to cash that card. Barbara winds up being attacked by a man they see in the cemetery who looks like he's on bath salts. Just kind of,
If you knew what bath salts were in 1968.
If bath salts had been invented in 1968.
And we don't mean the kind you use in a bathtub.
Yeah, that's what it would have looked like. Johnny comes to her defense and winds up getting his head bashed in on a gravestone. Barbara runs to the car and manages to crash it into a tree. She escapes on foot the person in pursuit. Now, all during the time this person is pursuing her, I'd like to note, they make no sound. Nothing. No noise.
Shuffle.
But yeah, I mean no vocal sound.
No vocal sound, right.
Which is creepy as hell. Barbara makes it to a house which seems to be deserted. Except that it's not. There's a dead body in the house that looks like it's been pushed through a wheat shredder or something, wheat thrasher. She winds up being confronted outside again by the guy from the cemetery, and she's rescued by a stranger, a young man named Ben. Ben gets her back in the house and manages to seal up the doors and the windows as much as possible. Barbara, needless to say,
she's kind of distraught.
That's putting it nicely. And she doesn't get any better. In fact, she's kind of useless. She's in shock, and the shock keeps getting deeper and deeper. As the night wears on, it turns out that the house has a cellar, and the cellar is occupied by a couple, Harry and Helen Cooper, who were coming back from an event, and they were at this event with their daughter Karen. They were attacked by a group of people. Their car was overturned, and they had been hearing a broadcast on the radio that there were all these seemingly random attacks going on, people just being jumped and killed by people that had no reason to jump them and kill them. And during all of that mess, Karen wound up being scratched and actually being bitten by one of these creatures. Plot point. They were hidden in the basement. They come back upstairs when they realize there are people in the house. And Harry's all like, we should go back down and hide in the cellar. It's very difficult to follow Harry's instructions, though, because Harry's a bit of an a-hole. He's obviously a bigot, more than a little bit of a jerk. And the fact that I bring up that he's a bigot is very obvious in the way he speaks to Ben, who happens to be an African American. As the house winds up having more people show up, including a young couple named Tom and Judy. As they're checking out the news broadcast, which they get the TV to work, they find out to their horror that what is going on all over the country. That people are being attacked by these figures everywhere. And as it turns out, these are people who have recently died. People who have recently died are coming back to life and attacking and eating anybody they can find.
Ew.
And the government, needless to say, has no idea what the hell is going on, what the hell is causing this, and more importantly, how to stop it. Although there is a fleeting talk on the television of a space probe that was coming back from Venus that was deliberately destroyed before it entered the atmosphere because the probe was giving off some kind of weird radiation. Now, we don't know if this is what is causing the dead to rise and attack the living, but since it didn't happen the day before, I would think it's a pretty good guess. The rest of the film is basically taken up with Ben trying to keep everybody alive because as they're in this house waiting for the military to show up and help them, more and more of these things, as they're referred to, at no point in this film are they referred to as zombies.
They are referred to by the television announcer as ghouls.
Yes.
Not zombies.
Yes. There's more of them. Because if you think about the idea of how many people die per day,
Not that many in each area. But.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
When you think of the number of people that die every day from accidents, old age, disease,
yeah,
murder,
all over
suicide,
the country, but not in one area.
Well, yeah, but they seem to have this innate thing of honing in on where people are
okay.
because that's the dinner bell.
Right.
Tom and Judy try and make it to a truck that's outside that is near a gas pump, and it goes terribly wrong. And Tom and Judy wind up being killed when the truck bursts into flames, and then they are pulled apart by the zombies and eaten on the lawn in a scene that is one of the most nauseating scenes in the history of ever.
It is, yeah.
Things continue to break down in the house with Harry continually ranting that they need to go down in the cellar, that they'll be safe, and Ben is like...
Think Harry, when you're thinking of Harry, think of Archie Bunker without the funny stuff.
Think of Archie Bunker minus the charm.
Yeah. That sounds weird, but Archie was charming in his own way.
That's sarcasm, kids. Anyway,
Not for me, it wasn't. Anyway.
No, but I know what you mean. But it finally culminating in Ben getting fed up with Harry's cowardice and he winds up shooting Ben. I'm sorry, Ben winds up shooting Harry. Harry stumbles downstairs where his daughter is still lying on this makeshift table that they have her on. He manages to reach his daughter and tenderly touch her body before he dies. The ghouls start breaking into the house, smashing the windows and things like that. And Barbara actually manages to, shake herself out of her stupor and manages to help Helen get herself free. Helen runs downstairs and finds her daughter Karen awake, except that she's not. She died, and she's come back. And Karen is in the process of devouring her father. Mm-hmm. Paging Dr. Freud, your thesis is here.
Don't go there.
That's the Electra syndrome taken to places I don't need it to go. Karen holds her arms out to her mother in almost like she remembers who her mother is kind of a way, while her mother pleads for her life, which does absolutely no good. When Karen grabs a trowel and stabs her mother to death with it.
Anyway.
Feces Part 2. The zombies the ghouls, however, manage to break into the house, and Barbara is pulled outside to be torn apart and eaten by her own brother. And I'm not touching the incest overlay with that.
Will you stop? We're not talking about that part. Let's just stick with the horror part.
Okay.
We can do a Freud analysis of the film some other time.
Ben manages to fight Karen off, who has come up from the basement, runs downstairs, locks himself in the basement, and winds up having to shoot both Harry and Helen, who have been reanimated as walking corpses, because the police did manage to get out there to people, if you can shoot these creatures in the head, that kills them.
Kill the brain and you kill the ghoul.
So in a really kind of sad twist of irony, it turns out that Harry was right. That staying in the cellar actually works for Ben because he manages to survive the night. The next...
A lot of good
the night.
A lot of good that did.
As the zombies just kind of wander around upstairs, he hears them shuffling around. Oddly, none of them seem to try and tear the door open. They just kind of walk into it and
That's
kind of...
because they don't know he's there.
Anyway. So the next morning, we see sheriff's posses out in the National Guard and all that stuff like that. And they're out shooting the remaining zombies, or ghouls, or whatever they are, who don't seem to be attacking people anymore. They're just kind of arbitrarily wandering through fields and stuff. They actually seem to be kind of wandering away from people, which is odd. But you see the sharpshooters and such, shooting them in the head, and down they go. Mm-hmm. Ben hears the commotion from outside, and goes upstairs, and as he's going upstairs, one of the men who is part of the posse, which I'd like to bring up are all white, notices a movement in the house. Ben peers out the window. The sheriff orders the man with him to shoot, and Ben is shot dead. And
now, the sheriff didn't see who was in the window, and I don't think either one of them saw him other than a moving figure in the house, thinking it was a zombie.
Yeah.
Just want to clarify
that. Nobody bothered to check, hey, are you a dead person walking around? And if they said no, they'd know that, hey, it's not a dead person.
Right.
Ben's body is, as the credits roll, in one of the most disturbing end credits ever, Ben's body is pierced by meat hooks and dragged outside, and the last thing we see, and this is all done in still shots, just like one frame
right.
kind of a thing. And the last shot is of a large bonfire of corpses, pieces of furniture, whatever they can find, so stuff will burn.
Right.
And the film ends.
With Dwayne Jones as Ben, Judith O'Dea as Barbara, Carl Hardiman as Harry, Marilyn Eastman as Helen, Keith Wayne as Tom, Judith Ridley as Judy, Kira Shawn, the daughter of the producer Carl Hardiman, who played Harry, the real life daughter of him, as Karen, Charles Craig as a newscaster and as a zombie, Bill Hensman as Cemetery Living Dead, as he's lifting this. He was the first one.
Mm-hmm.
George Kosana as Sheriff McClelland, Russell Striner as Johnny Blair, and Bill Cardille as the local TV news reporter guy. And the casting that got away, this was filmed in the Pittsburgh area.
Mm-hmm.
Romero originally wanted to cast Betty Aberlin as either Barbara or Judy. Betty Aberlin, of course, best known for Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Yes. Romero actually appears in the film as well as Don Quinn, who is one of the news reporters questioning the military and the police about what the hell is going on.
Right. When you think about it, all of the segments, this is weird because you think about it this way, and I never really gave it any thought till now. The stuff inside the house is actually the horror stuff, but when you're watching the sheriff talk to the reporters, or you're watching them watch the TV, it's actually like watching a cinema verite film where another cameraman is actually capturing the actions going on, like you were watching an episode of Cops.
That is true.
And I never really thought about that, but
that's true. That's a very good observation. I never thought.
It's
a
great film. I'm not a horror fan at all, and I will watch this anytime. It's a great film.
It really is an excellent film. As I've mentioned lots of times previously, I grew up watching Creature Double Feature on Channel 56 as a kid growing up in New England. And that was my introduction to horror and monster movies and stuff like that. And trust me, they never showed a film like this. Never. I didn't see Night of the Living Dead.
No, I don't think even Svengoolie would run this at this time. Mm-mm. No.
Although Wolfman Mac did, which I thought was...
Did he? I don't remember.
We watched it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome horror
Late
host
lamented Wolfman Mac, who's not on anymore, unfortunately. We loved him. He was awesome.
And I was a teenager when I saw this. I almost want to say I was in my late teens when I saw this. And I remember lying there in bed that night, stiff as a board, lying there with my eyes wide open, being like, can't sleep, they'll get me, can't sleep, they'll get me, can't sleep, they'll get me, can't sleep, they'll get me. I just completely, this movie flipped me out. And the thing about this movie that sticks with you, I mean, there's a lot of very iconic scenes that stick with you, but the ending, man.
Yeah.
The ending of this movie, it's like, what... The end of this movie is like a punch in the stomach.
It is, and it's because of the fact that they cast Dwayne Jones as Ben. You did not normally find an African American in the lead in movies, even in horror films, in the 1960s.
No.
Doing so at the time, in the same year where both Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. would be assassinated, was an incredibly risky maneuver on Romero's part.
Yeah.
And yet I can't even imagine what that role would have been like with another actor.
No, I know. Specifically, I think Romero was incredibly brave for doing that, especially when you look at the fact that Ben in the script is not written as an African-American man.
Right.
Although
it does come out later because Harry does do a lot of bigoted stuff. And so they did write that in.
They changed the script and did a little tweaking and this, that, and the other thing. That completely makes sense, especially for the time. This film could not have been made and could not have come out in any other decade but the 1960s.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
You know, you have this enormous distrust of the government in this film. You have this enormous distrust of the police in this film. You know, up till this point, in horror films, for the most part, the police, the government, the military, they're the people that ride in at the end of the film and save the day. I mean, you have the people that are, you know, the heroes, the civilians that are the ones that find the monster or the alien or whatever, and they're usually the ones that start killing them off at first. And then when things look darkest, that's when the military shows up with the guns a-blazing and the whole John Wayne kind of thing. You know, then you had this film where the government's like, we don't know what it is.
No.
And the military's like, well, we're just going to shoot anything.
Yeah.
You know, and that ends...
Which is actually the way they probably have to handle something like this if you don't know what it is.
Right. And the whole idea of,
there will be friendly fire civilian casualties and something like that.
Yeah. Which people were seeing on the news every night from Vietnam.
Yep.
You know, and the whole idea that, you know, the police are your friends, the police are there to look out for you, the friendly neighborhood beat cop kind of a thing, that had gone way by the wayside by the end of the 60s. And when you think about the fact that these are, we're assuming they're government-sanctioned hit squads.
Yeah.
I mean... We're assuming that.
It's implied, yeah.
It's implied that the police is giving an okay to gun down anybody who they think might be different.
Well...
They're not, you know...
We're not going to get into the sociological stuff here because we're talking about the horror aspect.
Well, like I just said, would it have killed them to take
Bad choice of words.
Not the best choice of words. No, I admit that. But it would have taken them 2 damn seconds to go... Hey, are you okay in there?
I know. Yes, it would have. And that would have made sense.
And for Ben to go, don't shoot! And then they would have been like, oh, crap, that's not a zombie. You know,
but they don't know if it's not a zombie because they haven't actually said, hey, they don't talk.
Apparently that hasn't occurred to anybody.
Right, exactly. So the same outcome may have happened. You never know.
Well,
it's interesting. I think it's interesting that, like you said, that there's a lot of stuff here that is... classic. And one area where this is not actually realized what a classic this is in a lesson about copyright. Mm-hmm. I have to bring this up because it's an important subject in the entertainment industry.
And you're much smarter about this than me. So.
Night of the Living Dead was issued and immediately went into the public domain because they messed up the copyright notice. It was removed when they replaced one of the end titles. And so, therefore, it went straight into the public domain, which means people were able to take this film and be inspired by it and do stuff. People were like, oh, George didn't make any money on this film. And I'm like, no, but he sure as hell made tons of money on the sequels, on the remakes, on the reimaginings. He made a lot of money and a name for himself.
Definitely.
And nowadays, you have... works like the one you're going to hear about in our in our DEJAVU review this week, that we're able to take this film frame by frame with this dialogue track and turn it into this marvelous animated feature that you would have never seen happen before.
Right.
You can do that now. This is the movie that proves that copyright is supposed to help transformative works grow. Because this movie became the blueprint for all the zombies that would come forward for the next 20 years.
Yes. As I mentioned, I mean, the whole idea of what a zombie was in Hollywood up till this point was the idea of a zombie as it is usually pictured or seen in the Haitian religion of voodoo, where a zombie is a reanimated corpse that is reanimated through magic to be a tireless, working
it's
slave.
Slave labor.
Yes.
Free slave labor without anything to worry about.
Right. And there were several films before Night of the Living Dead that dealt with that zombie. Films like White Zombie, I Walked with a Zombie, films like that. And then Night of the Living Dead comes along and takes the whole idea of a zombie, a reanimated corpse, and mashes it together with a figure from the Middle East, a figure called a ghoul. Now, a ghoul in the Middle Eastern mythology was a creature that wasn't an animated corpse or anything like that. It was a monster. It was a monster on its own. These were creatures that hung around in graveyards and ate corpses. Sometimes they would eat a living person if they could catch one. They usually preferred children or things like, smaller things that they could catch. So Romero decided to take these two things, the zombie and the ghoul, and put them together. And now you have a reanimated corpse that feeds on living people. And he throws in something else that makes it even more compelling. He throws in the very basic human fear of contagion. The idea that if you are bitten by a zombie, which was already focused and looked upon in the werewolf mythos in Hollywood, which they added because that's complete crap in the usual werewolf mythos. The whole idea that if you are killed by a zombie, if you're bitten by a zombie or whatever, and you die, you come back as a zombie. And that completely changed the game. That totally flipped the script. Can
I interject this here?
Sure.
This is how it changed this, and we're we've got to wrap this up. But
right.
The film was released in 1968, and as it was typically thought of, the national distributor released it as a kiddie matinee, Saturday morning kiddie matinee, as was typical for horror films at that time. Roger Ebert described the experience of seeing it with a crowd of kids this way, quote, "The kids in the audience were stunned. There was almost complete silence. The movie had stopped being delightfully scary about halfway through and had become unexpectedly terrifying. There was a little girl across the aisle from me, maybe 9 years old, who was sitting very still in her seat and crying. It's hard to remember what sort of effect this movie might have had on you when you were 6 or 7. But try to remember, at that age, kids takes the events on screen seriously, and they fiercely identify with the hero. When the hero is killed, that's not an unhappy ending, but a tragic one. No one got out alive. It's just over. That's all." Close quote.
Well,
that's a pretty powerful thing, and kids today, those kids have probably turned into today's horror producers, directors, writers.
Like I said, that statement, no one gets out, that is not an accident on Romero's part. It's brilliant on Romero's part.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, this film could not have been made in any other time in history. This film purposely, I think, you have the whole line from The Doors, "No one here gets out alive." This film typifies that, and it's just so perfect. It is one of, in my opinion, the most frightening movies I have ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this movie stuck with me for days and days and days after I saw it.
Mm-hmm.
And
yet, it's not so revered that when we saw it on the big screen for the first time, it was as part of Riff Tracks Live.
Well, as I've mentioned before, you can misty good movies. I've always been of that opinion. I mean, there's some things you shouldn't misty, like Schindler's List or something like that.
Yeah.
But, one thing about the 90 remake that I really like is that Barbara is no longer just a simp. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be nasty to Judith O'Day, but Patricia Tallman's Barbara is actually more than just a screaming meanie in this film, which I think is a good thing. Because you couldn't make a movie like that in 1990 and just have the woman have, her whole point is to sit there and scream. You couldn't do it. People would go nuts. Mm. But we'd like to know what kind of effect Night of the Living Dead had on you as a movie fan. If it had any effect at all. I like to think it did.
You can see it practically anywhere, as it is public domain. A lot of places have got it. And
a lot of places that are running it again because of tributes for George Romero.
Right, and they can without paying for it because it's a public domain film.
True.
Let us know what you think of this, and stick around. We have a flashback review from several years ago of the animated version coming up next.
When Subject Cinema returns.
Subject Cinema's Drive-In Summer is co-presented by Going Attractions, the definitive story of the American drive-in, from director April Wright. You can check it out right now on Amazon Prime or order the DVD at goingattractions.com.
Subject Cinema. Drive-In Summer.
eCinema One is your choice for great info and commentary about the world of film and entertainment. Daily trailer postings, the latest news and film reviews, commentary about the state of the industry, the weekly Subject Cinema and 3-Minute Weekend podcast, and so much more you won't believe it. New material is being posted daily, so join us each day and see what you're missing out on. Once you visit, you will always be back for more. eCinema One from PNRNetworks, eCinema1.com. Want to listen to Subject Cinema on the go? Check out Stitcher. You can access all the latest episodes right from iPhone or Android. Check it out. Click on the Stitcher logo on our sidebar or go to Stitcher.com and search for your favorite PNR Network show. Get started today.
Subject Cinema. Drive-In Summer. Dixie Kirkham and Kim Brown.
Deja vu. What is it, and why does it occur?
Just had that little feeling. You ever get that funny little, that kind of feeling, that vuja day? Not deja vu. This is vuja day. This is the strange feeling that somehow none of this has ever happened before.
Deja Vu Review.
They're coming to get you, Barbara. They're coming for you, Barbara. They're coming for you. Look.
Hey, kids, you know what this weekend was? Huh?
I hope it's not a Binky the Clown show.
No, do you know what this weekend was? Do you, huh? Do you, huh? Do you know what happened this weekend? Do you know? It was really super important. Can anybody guess?
No. What
Come
is
on,
it?
take a guess.
What is
take a
it?
Guess.
What
Somebody
is
guess.
it?
Well, TC watched his very first actual honest-to-goodness horror movie this weekend.
No, I didn't. I've seen tons of horror movies over the years.
TC watched his very first classic horror movie that I've been bugging him about for years to watch this weekend. Yay! I'm so proud of you, honey.
Well, I didn't exactly see the original.
Well, no. But it's a start.
It is.
And you actually want to see, and you want to see the original now. So
I do. And I'll tell you
accomplished.
something. This came to our attention because it appeared at the Cape Ann Film Festival this month in Gloucester, Mass. And we were like, oh, wow, this ought to be really something.
And then we saw the trailer for it, and we were like, we need this now, right now.
It is the brainchild of Mike Schneider, a writer, producer, director.
And one sick ticket.
And over 100 different people who were the artists for Night of the Living Dead Reanimated. Do you want to explain what this was?
Night of the Living Dead Reanimated is the classic film, the George Romero classic, Night of the Living Dead, with a difference. As TC mentioned, over 100 artists got together and put their own personal stamp on the film. The actual film is actually running. I mean, it's the actual film, the actual dialogue, everything. I mean, there are scenes that are actually look like they're rotoscoped from the original film. But there are also every other kind of graphic arts and animation that you can think of, from a couple of anime-style shots to some really graphic art with, brains and guts and stuff leaking out, to sock puppets, to, anthropomorphic animals, to everything in between.
Play-Doh, claymation, everything.
Dealing with the original,
it's done exactly
terrifying story.
Right from the original movie. It's the same length, the same audio track is used. There's several different art techniques where they've actually just taken the original film and done some work to it on the screen and turned it into an animation or a visual look. Yeah. This was such an experience. And it was such a wild ride. I mean, there were a couple of times when we were sitting there. Now, I've seen this movie more than once. I didn't see Night of the Living Dead till I was a teenager. And I still contend... I still haven't seen Night of the Living Dead, the original, so... I've been too chicken. She's watched it 3 times in the last 2 years. Yeah. I will... And I still feel this way. This, in my opinion, is one of the most frightening movies that has ever been made. The night I watched this movie, after it was over, I was a teenager lying in bed going, can't sleep, they'll get me, can't sleep, they'll get me. This movie freaked me out, and I just have, but it freaked me out in a good way, to the point where I've seen it over and over and over again. The remake is actually not bad, that was done in the 90s. I actually kind of like it. But this version is just utterly incredible. I mean, there are some times when you actually do sit there and laugh. You can't help but laugh when some of the news footage where they're talking about the dead coming back to life and all this stuff like that, and what should be done with dead bodies and all that is being reenacted by sock puppets with glasses on. It's just funny. Some of the coolest thing I thought were some of the most dramatic scenes, and they took on a very surreal and even funny quality. The one where they had the pictures of the people from the movie and cutouts with doing the human clutch lips. Cargo. Doing the human lips. Doing the clutch cargo. That was freaky. The whole thing, the other thing that really got me was some of it reminded me a lot of the Karen Carpenter thing, the using Barbie dolls, figures and Barbie dolls and stuff like that. And I'm like, especially that one shot where I'm going, that Barbie's got junk in her trunk. Yeah, the one doll looked just like the Karen Carpenter doll they used, and it was really freaky. And I was like, great, Night of the Living Dead is brought to you by Todd Haynes. Okay, but nobody's getting spanked. No, they're just getting paperclipped to death. The scene where Karen kills her mom with the trowel. Her name's even Karen. Yeah. That was a Skipper doll, though. It was the mom that looked like the Karen Carpenter doll. Yeah. For some reason, they used an unbent staple instead of a trowel. No, it was a paperclip.
Paperclip.
It was a bent
I'm sorry. Unbent paperclip. I'm sorry. This is, if you are a Night of the Living Dead fan, you need to see this. Because trust me, you have never seen this done any other way than by Night of the Living Dead Reanimated. Trust me, it is an experience, it is a ride, and it really shows what a labor of love it really was. You could tell that a lot of care went into this. I was actually familiar with some of the artists. I've seen their work on other things. Across the internet, and there's a complete list of every 100 plus artist that appears, or some of their stuff appears, including contact numbers or addresses, email addresses, and their websites on the Night of the Living Dead Reanimated website, which is NOTLDR. .com. And I mean, it's really amazing. And they use as we said, they use the original cast, the original audio track.
It's
just amazing. It's an amazing. What would you rate it?
I gave it 4 stars. I was really impressed.
I gave it 4 bouquets out of 5 too.
The artwork was amazing in places, particularly the thing that got me was they would do different artist renditions of the same part of the scene. They'd switch really fast between the art stuff, and that was no more evident than in the corpse in the house.
Yeah.
Which was just
the
really
scene where Barbara
creepy.
finds the chewed up corpse at the beginning of the movie, and then we see. I agree with you. I think it's got some amazing work. These people are all so talented. It's frightening.
And I have to be totally honest. I did have a vivid nightmare from some of the artwork.
You did?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
You didn't say anything.
Well, it wasn't terrible. I mean, I woke up and I was like, oh, damn it, that movie. Of course, it might have been that. It might have been the fact that we watched that and then segued right into White Zombie on Wolfman Max, Chiller Drive-In.
Yeah, we did.
So that was difficult. But don't forget, by the way, if you haven't heard the promo yet, Wolfman Max here next week.
So if you are any kind of a zombie aficionado and you don't have this yet, shame on you. You can order it from the website.
You can get it from Google also, from Amazon.com.
Like we did.
And we'll have, in fact, you can buy it from Amazon on a link that'll be right up in the notes because we want you guys to see it. And we especially want our horror fanatics, Rob, Eric, you guys. Let us know. If you've never seen this, let us know what you think of it. Please go out of your way to see it. Night of the Living Dead Reanimated. Really, really something amazing and completely surreal that you will never forget.
Totally.
Subject Cinema Drive-In Summer.
Deja vu. What is it, and why does it occur?
Just had that little feeling. You ever get that funny little, that kind of feeling, that Vuja day? You know, not deja vu. This is Vuja day. This is the strange feeling that somehow none of this has ever happened before.
Deja Vu Review.
Deal of sort of anger. You know, I think mostly that the 60s.
One of the most classic films of all time in the horror genre is George Romero's Night of the Living Dead. Now a new documentary takes a look at how that movie came to be. And there are a lot of interesting stories behind the making. In the new first-run documentary feature, Birth of the Living Dead. Give us the rundown.
Birth of the Living Dead is not only about the George Romero classic Night of the Living Dead, but it is also about the times that this movie was created during. And let's be honest, this movie could not have been created during any other time except the late 60s.
It could have been, but it wouldn't have been the same movie as it is.
Yeah.
It was the times that made it the movie it is. If you'd made it in the 70s, there would have been a lot of political stuff with, like, Watergate and crap like that. In the 50s, it would have been...
in the 50s, it wouldn't have been made.
Voodoo explanations for the zombies.
In the 50s, it wouldn't have been made. Nope. It might have been... Well, no, I tell a lie. It might have been made, but it would have never been released. Nobody would have touched it. Birth of the Living Dead looks at the career of George Romero a little bit in depth into his early career, which involved the fact that he was originally from New York. He was from the Bronx, but he made he spent a good deal of his time in Pittsburgh as well as an adult, and that's where he was working, making film, small commercials and things like that. And also he brings up the fact that we're watching the film, and all of a sudden this very familiar music starts playing, and we're both looking at each other like, wait, what?
As George pointed out, almost anybody in the industry in Pittsburgh worked at one time or another on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Or worked for Fred, worked for Fred Rogers.
Same thing.
So
that was Fred Rogers.
Yeah. And we're looking at each other like, what?
George made a film for Mr. Rogers' show called Mr. Rogers Undergoes a Tonsillectomy.
A tonsillectomy, yeah.
And they had the camera in the operating theater while he was getting this operation.
Yeah.
Oh my God! I was on the floor.
And this was what inspired George Romero to make a horror movie. Because he actually says during this film that this was one of the scariest things that he ever filmed.
I wouldn't want to film a real operation. Would
no,
you?
I wouldn't either. But
thank God it was in black and white.
Yeah. No, it wasn't.
Yeah,
was it colored?
No, it wasn't. It was in black and white.
Oh, anyway. He decided to put this movie together with some other, with his company, and also bringing in friends and investors and anybody else that they could find to make Night of the Living Dead, which originally was called Night of the Flesh Eaters, but the title was changed. And it was also not copyrighted, which is how it wound up in public domain and probably wound up a lot of...
Their original print was copyrighted, but when their distributor put a new title on it, they covered over what they had done, and that covered the copyright too, so it was in the public domain at that point.
Yeah.
George, they would have made millions on that movie over time. But
yeah. This is a really amazing film. It is a fascinating look at one of the films that shaped a lot of people's perception of horror. To say this film completely changed the horror genre is not being facetious.
No,
I don't think
not.
At all.
It was the first film of its kind, and I mean now look at today. You've got 80,000 zombie movies out there.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a hit zombie movie, a hit zombie TV series in The Walking Dead here in America. You've got another zombie series in Great Britain, which is kind of similar to Warm Bodies, where the zombies work back into society.
Right.
You got all these. It's
you had
amazing.
World War Z, which was a huge hit earlier this year.
Was a surprise. It was a hit, and it was surprised both of us at how good it was.
Yeah. The thing about this film, which we actually have talked about numerous times on this show previously, is the fact that this completely changed the zombie for horror culture. Simply because what this film does is it makes the zombie an amalgam. The original character of a zombie, the original creature of the zombie, was actually done more accurately in earlier films, which they do bring up in this.
Yes, they do.
Films like I Walked with a Zombie, White Zombie, films like that.
Which involves voodoo rituals.
Which involves... That is what a zombie was originally. A dead person brought back to life to do slave labor. That's it.
Yeah.
None of this brain-eating stuff, none of this other shoot him in the head crap.
There were some interesting revelations about that in this movie that really I was just finishing eating, and it's like, oh man, really?
Yeah, don't eat during this movie. Do yourself a favor. This film took the zombie figure, and actually fused it with the ghoul, which is a figure from Middle Eastern mythology, a creature that haunted graveyards and ate freshly dead bodies and would eat live people if they got a hold of them. So it took these two characters, melded them together, tossed in the fear of contagion, the whole idea that if you are bitten by a zombie, you become a zombie.
That plays a whole huge part in 28 Days Later, in World War Z, and much later films,
The Walking Dead. And we have so many people talking about all of the cultural aspects of this film. The fact that, as we've brought up before, George Romero actually brings up himself in the film that when they wrote the script, the main character, Ben, the main male lead, is not written as an African American.
It's just written as straightforward man.
He's just a guy. It's not written whether he's black, white, yellow, green, purple, whatever.
Chartreuse, plaid.
Right. The fact that the actor that played him, Dwayne Jones, happened to be African American was just the way things worked out.
You don't even notice it when you see it.
It's
really,
not.
It goes away really fast.
Yeah, we don't notice it because we were brought up, thankfully, we'd like to think, in a more enlightened
yeah, it's true.
time.
Back in that time, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner was just out that year, earlier that year, and was a big shocker.
You got to figure a couple of years earlier, people lost their snit because Bill Shatner kissed Nichelle Nichols on an episode of Star Trek. That people went completely wagga crazy. But you have so much in this film that it takes so many horror standbys and completely throws them out the window.
Yeah.
The military is useless. The government is useless. The police are scary as hell because they come off more as a lynch mob than, yay, we're saved, it's the police.
Right.
You know, and this was all stuff that was, earlier, horror films, that was completely going against everything, and we haven't even talked about the end of this film.
Right.
Which
we're not really talking, we don't want to talk about Night of the Living Dead. We're talking about this movie.
Right.
And this movie features an extensive new interview with George Romero, and it is hilariously funny in places. Also interviews with film critic Elvis Mitchell, producer Gail Ann Hurd, among others. And it looks into how it was made, and it really, none of these people had ever acted before.
No.
A lot of them were friends and investors and even sales contacts for the commercials that they were doing for these Pittsburgh beer companies and everything else with their commercial company. And it's fascinating to see how many of them wanted to be a part of the film. Most of them were zombies, and you had local newscasters agreeing to do this, both on the air as a news reporter, and then as the guy who does the news segments in the movie is actually a Pittsburgh newscaster.
Right.
That's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
I'm really, it was billed as Pittsburgh's first homemade feature film, and of course it went to kiddie matinees and freaked a lot of people out, including Roger Ebert, who we talked about that last year.
Mm-hmm.
You can find that review on Ebert.com. It's an amazing look, and he did revise it later. Actually, I think he even had it at Ebert Fest one year. For adults, he considers it one of the greatest films. But at the time when it came out, he was writing, and there was an audience full of kids there, and they were freaking out, which is understandable. Because this movie is terrifying. It really is. This is one of the few horror films I saw after we saw Night of the Living Dead Reanimated, which is the redone version, all with different forms of animation. I had never seen it before. I had always chickened out. I don't find it that scary.
Really?
I find it a fascinating character study, and it's an excellent film. But I don't find it as terrifying as everybody does, probably because I'm, let's face it, 50, and I didn't see it till I was like 48. And I think maybe that has something to do with the fact that I wasn't a 13 or 14-year-old kid seeing it on TV for the first time and freaking out and running into bed. I don't know, but it's a fascinating film.
I was a teenager when I saw it, and I remember lying there in bed that night, literally stiff as a board, eyes wide open, going, "Oh no, I'm not sleeping. No. Because it's just the overwhelming feeling of hopelessness that pervades this film. And watching how they did it is truly fascinating, because these all seem like very nice, fun people to be around.
Strangely enough, they didn't have any interviews. They did a live shot with Bill Hintzman, who was the first zombie, who passed away last year, and it's at the end of the film. But none of the participants were interviewed. Some of them have passed away, including Dwayne Jones.
Yes.
I was...
That was a little bit like...
It was strange not to see more people than that. Although Larry Fessenden, who was one of the producers on this and who has done a lot of genre favorites of the Clotrudis people here in Boston, he was actually honored a couple years ago by Clotrudis, has some great commentary on why this movie is such a classic. And it's really an interesting, amazing look into how little money went into one of the biggest, most revered horror films of all time.
Yep.
What's your score?
I give Birth of the Living Dead an A-.
I give it an A. I thought it was fascinating.
The only reason I gave it an A- was because there were no interviews with anybody from the cast.
Right, and you actually looked up, Judith O'Dea is still alive.
Yes.
Who played Barbara, and so was the lady that played both the mother and the daughter.
Yeah, they're both still alive.
But Dwayne Jones and the guy, the two other male leads are both dead.
Yes.
So then
I just thought that was weird.
It is.
I mean, they just feel like they've moved on from it and they don't want to, which is fine.
Yeah,
but this is, if you are a horror enthusiast, definitely check this film out.
It's going to be making its way across the country slowly, and probably soon you'll be able to check it out on demand as well. We'll let you know when you can get it, and you can get more information in this week's show notes.
The best movies. Subject Cinema.
Want to know what top titles from film and TV are hitting home video this week? Hi, I'm TC Kirkham of Subject Cinema, inviting you to check out Tuesday Digidex, our weekly roundup of all the new home video releases in the U.S. each week. Whether it's DVD, Blu-ray, or streaming you're looking for, we've got it covered. Tuesday Digidex, every Tuesday morning, from Subject Cinema at ecinema1.com, a PNRNetworks podcast powered by Libsyn. Subscribe on iTunes or your favorite podcast service.
Na 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 Pee-wee. And holy rusted metal, it's Aunt B too.
Hi, I'm Aunt B. Join myself and Pee-wee every week as we cover comic books, comic stuff that's happening on TV, comics in the movies.
And we'll be doing it all in our tightest tights and our capiest capes in our secret lair.
Comic Grotto, where two guys light up the bat signal. www.comicgrotto.com.
Subject Cinema, drive-in summer.
Well, unless you've been living under a rock the last few days, the 2017 edition of San Diego Comic-Con, the biggest Comic-Con in the country, was going on this week, and I don't know. It doesn't seem like anything really came out of this in news or anything. Just kind of a bunch of boring crap, you know. Don't you
what?
think?
My heart.
Well, we did find out that the people who are producing the new Star Trek series have no idea that they like what the fans are like, because they told them if you don't understand diversity, then you don't understand Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, yeah, but your version of diversity and Gene Roddenberry's version of diversity are two entirely different things.
Yeah.
So it's like,
and considering that Gene Roddenberry, wrote the damn show.
Yeah. And the sad thing is his son is on the producer side, but I honestly think Star Trek Discovery, although it did get a good reception on Saturday, is not going to be a success. And we'll see what happens in September. Of course, the big news, Marvel and DC, pretty much taking over the entire thing. The Justice League trailer debuted, the new one that was, I would assume, was assembled by Joss Whedon, who has taken over for Zack Snyder after he left to deal with the death of his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are raving about the trailer, whether or not they make actually mention no protectors. I don't know who the protectors are. Do you?
I think they mean protectors as in, people protecting the planet.
No, because they are very specific. No protectors, no lanterns, no Kryptonian.
Yeah.
And lanterns, we know what that is. Kryptonian, Superman died at the end of Batman vs. Superman. So, supposedly. So, protector, I'm aware of the Guardians.
Yeah.
But I'm not aware, and the Manhunters, but I'm not aware of the protectors. That's probably
I'm
after my era. But anyway, the new Justice League trailer looks great.
It does.
Ezra Miller walked out as somebody dressed as what?
What
anime?
Dressed as a character from Full Metal Alchemist.
Okay.
I'm like, because it's Ezra.
It's
of
Ezra.
Course.
We love Ezra.
We do love Ezra,
and he's been a rising star.
I have to be honest though, his outfit was better than the Gandalf look last year because he's just too tiny to be Gandalf. I'm sorry.
He's 6'3". What are you talking about?
Well, why did he look so short?
I don't know. He
looked
he's
dwarfed by the outfit. I don't.
Probably that was probably the outfit, not him.
Yeah, the outfit looked like it swallowed him.
No, he's 6'1". He's 6'1". There's.
And of course, we had Jason Momoa.
And of course, she couldn't keep herself from. I had to clean up a puddle of drool off the living room floor.
That wasn't all drool. Some of it
family show.
Some of it was sweat. What? Some of it was sweat.
Okay.
Calm down.
That
guy is a nutcase. I love him.
The reviews for the trailer were good. Everybody gave us a good reviews or got a good reaction for Thor Ragnarok and Black Panther.
Yeah, I actually watched the trailer for Black Panther. It was really good.
And they have to be. They announced the next slew of DC movies, which includes the rebooted Flash movie, which is now called Flashpoint, which is very worrisome. And Wonder Woman 2 was officially announced, and a number of other things, and no big surprise there after the success of the first one. And easily the best of the DC films so far.
Absolutely.
Everybody's thinking that this movie is looking better in the new trailer than it has in the previous couple of teasers that have come out, because it seems to have had there's an emphasis on goofy comedy from Aquaman and Flash. There's some.
Well, I like the fact that It's very obvious that Aquaman is a follower of the book of DEJAVU.
Yes,
and,
that's very obvious in this movie.
Flash is definitely...
If you don't know what that is, Subject Cinema at PNRNetworks, and I'll tell you.
Look it up. And Flash is like, hyper sarcastic and, kind of almost like the way he was voiced by Michael Rosenbaum in Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, which was really terrific.
Mm-hmm.
There was, panels for Star Wars: The Last Jedi.
Oh yeah, the little Star Wars film there every year.
I'm so scared. I'm like, every time I see...
This isn't the Blair Witch Star Wars.
I know, but every time I see something for this movie, I'm like, somebody hold me!
Isn't it interesting, by the way, just noting this in what we were talking about a little while ago.
Mm-hmm.
What was the name of the cemetery in Line of the Living Dead?
They never said the name of the cemetery.
Oh, they mentioned Blair County or something.
Maybe. I don't know.
That's also where Blair Witch is centered.
Yeah, in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And other great movies in Pittsburgh. Anyway, there was all kinds of different...
obviously
plenty of TV.
Supernatural
There was a Flash TV.
Supernatural had a...
Oh, yeah, Supernatural. Yeah, whoop-de-doo. And...
well, that's important for some of us, up there with air, and that kind of thing. Like you mentioned...
Well, I wouldn't know. None of the shows I watch would be on at Comic-Con. I don't think we're going to have a killer beat-em-up movie starring Ree Drummond or Ina Garten.
No, but I'd pay to see it if it happened. I want to see Ina Garten show up.
The Pioneer Superwoman.
I want to see Ina Garten show up on The Flash. I'd laugh my head off. Well, he eats a lot because he has to keep up his metabolism.
She could be doing her TV show on The Flash. Anyway, Comic-Con is getting good reviews from everybody online, and it's
there were some hiccups at the beginning. They said there were a lot of long lines and some delays and
there
things
always
at the
are
beginning.
on the first day.
There
always are on the first day until everything gets sorted out. But of course, the infamous Hall H played host to all the big panels, and they did include some extra Avengers stuff because other Avengers were there at the end of the Black Panther thing, and so they did have kind of a teaser for Infinity War and a few other things going on.
It was that announced at Comic-Con, or was that it was, wasn't it?
What's that?
That Michelle Pfeiffer has been cast.
Michelle Pfeiffer is Janet Van Dyne in the new Ant-Man and the Wasp movie.
Yeah. Which means that Janet is coming back from the
not necessarily. It could be flashbacks
or whatever.
It could be flashbacks.
Maybe, but she did another one that went from DC to Marvel, so that's interesting. Of course, they didn't have
villain to hero.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
So, and Chris Evans has done the same thing.
Chris Evans has bounced back and forth. It's ridiculous.
The Losers was a DC Vertigo.
Yes, yeah.
Originally?
And I mean, he was Johnny Storm. Then he was in the Losers, and now he's Captain America. Of course, he may not be Captain America for much longer. There's been rumors. He's actually said that
Infinity War will conclude the current Avengers.
Yeah, and there's been all this talk that Steve Rogers,
the next level of Avengers,
that Steve Rogers isn't going to be
Captain Marvel.
That Steve Rogers isn't going to be Captain America any longer. Anybody wants me, I will be in the bathtub in the fetal position, crying with a bottle of vodka.
It's not like they killed off the Winchesters again. Sorry.
Har.
I thought it was funny.
You would, and that's your problem.
Yes, I know. It's a very nice problem.
I have to be honest, though. Like I said, and I realize that, I know people are probably like, you're a Star Wars nerd, calm down. But
you're a Star Wars nerd, calm down.
I'm going to remember, well, we obviously have the new Doctor Who to talk about as well, which certain people are like, yay, and other people are...
I haven't seen how the Doctor Who panel went. Jodie Whittaker was here, and I don't know whether or not... I'm assuming it went over well. They kind of teased a fifth season of Sherlock from Stephen Moffat also, which is possible.
If that happens, I will break out into a Snoopy happy dance. So be warned.
It will happen because both Benedict and Martin love doing that show.
Yeah, be warned. There will be Snoopy happy dancing going on, and as usual, when I'm Snoopy happy dancing, it won't be pretty.
Earthquake. It's just the way you can't pound your feet. I don't mean that in a nasty way. It's just the way that you have a tendency. You're not very graceful when you do your Snoopy Happy Dance.
No, I don't.
I'd much rather you Cabbage Patch. It's much better.
I think it's just because I tend to flail when I Snoopy Happy Dance. I tend to flail and stuff gets knocked over.
I didn't mean that as an insult, really. That's
okay.
not where I was going with that.
That's all right.
Sorry.
No, but the whole Last Jedi thing, I am looking forward to this movie, and at the same time, I am dreading it so effing much. You know, I'm like, please, George, please don't destroy my childhood.
George isn't involved with these.
Please, is Ryan Johnson
directing? Ryan Johnson is the current director of this one, and Colin Trevorrow is directing the next one, I believe.
I'm just asking Ryan Johnson to not destroy my childhood. You know,
Trust in Ryan Johnson. He restored our faith in mysteries with Brick.
Yeah, that's
Man
true.
is a genius.
Yes, he is.
And it's said to be very good, too, so we'll...
Don't make me have to cut all my hair off,
Maybe it's time for the Jedis to end.
Or, don't make me cut my hair off or other mourning methods, because I really don't want to have to set myself on fire. I'd really rather not have to go there.
Maybe we could have a cameo from Onion Wan Kenobi.
You've been waiting all day to use that, haven't you?
Too much Glove and Boots Gaming Channel. Oh, well, anyway. Comic-Con is
really
ending
awful
today.
How addicting that is.
And we'll have trailers up throughout the week of the stuff that's been released to the YouTube and to the interwebs over the next few days. So keep an eye on eCinema 1. They'll be popping up all week.
That's what we need.
What?
I Can't Has Cheeseburger, the movie.
Well, I'd rather
If we can have an emoji movie, we can have a cheeseburger
Oh, God,
movie.
don't even talk about that stupid emoji movie. I'd much rather see a Maru movie in which he gets to kill Hannah.
Oh, stop that! You're so mean!
Well, at least leave her in, like, the birdhouse or something. Lock her in so she can't get out. Anyway, that'd be something that Comic-Con would pay to see, I bet. Mm-hmm. Comic-Con is ending, and we'll have all the crazy stuff for you over the next week on eCinema 1, so be sure to check it out every day. eCinema1.com.
Subject Cinema Drive-In Summer.
Subject Cinema's Drive-In Summer is co-presented by Going Attractions, the definitive story of the American drive-in, from director April Wright. You can check it out right now on Amazon Prime or order the DVD at goingattractions.com. Now you can bring all your favorite PNR Network shows to your television. Check out PNR Networks on Roku. It's all of what PNR Networks has to offer, all in one place. The entire PNR Networks podcast family, Subject Cinema Reviews, Platinum Rose's Garden, Mirrorball Mayhem, 3-Minute Weekend, Cave Babble, and Mashed Up Madness, plus the latest videos from PNR Networks and Larry 411, all right at your fingertips. And even more is on the horizon. It's literally thousands of hours, a decade worth of great audio and video, all under one roof. And best of all, it's all free. The PNR Network's Roku channel. Simply go to the On Roku area of any of our websites or click on the Roku button on the sidebar to subscribe. And don't forget to tell all your Roku-owning friends we're here as well.
eCinema Boston is your best choice for all the latest news and info about happenings in the world of film here in the hub of the universe. Local theater listings, ticketing info, reviews of local venues, spotlight on Boston actors, the latest film shoots, and a whole lot more. If you're in the Metro Boston area, you need eCinema Boston from PNR Networks. Once you visit, you will always be back for more. eCinemaBoston.com.
Subject Cinema Drive-In Summer. T.C. Kirkham and Kim Brown.
Movies at the Multiplex.
This mission is a simple in and out. Agent Valerian, you'll be running solo.
I only work with my partner.
Hi.
We're a team. Let's go.
You're running nearly 20 minutes late.
Yeah, well, time flies when you're having fun.
Welcome to Alpha. The city of 1,000.
I have been waiting for this film since the first trailer, actually since before the first trailer, since I saw them on Extra doing the behind-the-scenes stuff when they were shooting it. I'm like, this is going to be awesome. It's visionary director Luc Besson and his interpretation of his favorite comic books from when he was a kid, a French comic book that never really went outside of France, I don't think, but is a huge, it was long enough that it was ran for 30 plus years. And now it's a major motion picture and in theaters everywhere. Dane DeHaan, Cara Delevingne, Valerian, and the City of 1,000 Planets. Give us the rundown.
The beginning of Valerian and the City of 1,000 Planets actually begins in the past.
With a fifth grade science lesson.
No, it doesn't. Stop that. It's more of a fifth grade history lesson. We get a montage of space travel and how space travel brought the planet together and people, bonded as humans and stretched out into the galaxy. And where we are at the point where Valerian kicks off, plot-wise, is many, 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 many years in the future. And there is a space station. Would that be accurate? It's not moving, so.
Yeah.
A space station called Alpha out there in the darkness of space, which is a space station home to millions of creatures from races all over the galaxy that live on this enormous space station. And they live in different sections because there are, creatures that only breathe water or breathe different things that aren't oxygen and all these other things like that. Also, at the beginning of the film, we see a planet that we don't really know very much about and that has very peaceful, very beautiful people on it that winds up being besieged by something going on above the planet where all of these spaceships start crashing on the planet and causing an enormous amount of destruction. And when this happens, all of the stuff that happens on this planet winds up being seen as a dream by a young man who is Major Valerian, who is a member of the police force, the Galactic Police Force, for lack of a better term. Valerian has this dream, and he sees all this stuff in this dream about this planet and these people that harvest these beautiful pearls that contain a super crazy amount of energy. And one of the ways they harvest the pearls is by feeding the pearls to this little cute, adorable kind of lizard armadillo thing. Hedgehog.
It looks like a horned toad.
It looks like what would happen if you put a lizard, an armadillo, and a hedgehog in a blender and then hit frappe. This little thing, which is adorable and I want one, is called a converter. And the reason it's called a converter is because whatever you feed it, it kind of shakes like a dog shaking off water, and all of whatever you feed it, it makes more of. It's like a copier with eyes or something. Valerian and his partner / subordinate / he'd like it to be more than that, Sergeant Laureline, are charged with getting a hold of this converter, and they know that a converter, which is the last of its kind, is being held by a black market dealer in a bizarre, for lack of a better term, a shopping area that is in an alternate pocket dimension that people get to with this sort of virtual reality kind of thing that I didn't quite get, but it was very cool. Valerian is constantly, and I do mean constantly, flirting with Laureline and asking her to marry him and so on and so forth. And Laureline is basically like, you're just saying that crap because I don't want you. You know, he wants her real bad because she doesn't want him at all. And it continues from there into a story of intergalactic intrigue, cover-ups, a lot of running, a whole bunch of shooting, an amazingly jaw-dropping scene with the always sexy Rihanna, and a story about what people will do and how much human beings have changed, and sadly, how much they haven't.
With Dane DeHaan as Valerian, Carol DeLaving as Laureline, Clive Owen as Commander Fillet. Rihanna as Bubble, Ethan Hawke as Jolly the Pimp, Herbie Hancock as Defense Minister, Chris Wu as Captain Neza, Rutger Hauer as the President of World State Federation, John Goodman as the voice of Igon Cirrus, Elizabeth Debicki as the voice of Emperor Haban Lemai, plus Sam Spruill, Elaine Chavat, Tom Findlay, Matteo Kaslowitz, Jonas Blokat, Sand Van Roy, Sasha Luce, Lois Luthier, Olivia Megaton, and Sam Douglas. What did you think?
Well, I have to be perfectly honest. Valerian and the City of 1,000 Planets, which is based on a comic called Valerian and Laureline, written by Pierre Christin and illustrated by Jean-Claude Mézières, I hope I'm even close, is visually stunning. There are points in this film where I'm like, wow.
We did see it in real 3D, and I admit I'm going to go see it in 4D this week.
The problem was, for every moment that I was going, damn, this is amazing, there was another moment where I was going, what the hell is going on? Visually, it is gorgeous. It is also frustrating as... I won't say that word. Frustrating as fork. I never like a lot of exposition. I am not an exposition person for the most part.
No, neither one of us are.
But this was one time I'm going a little exposition. Just a little bit, please. I want to know who these people are. I want to know what's going on. I want subtitles. You know, it was great to watch. The scenes with Rihanna as Bubble, who is a shape-shifting entertainer who you get the feeling is not doing this because they want to.
Right.
And that just broke my heart. Were just like, good grief, this is fantastic. But there was a lot of this film where I'm just sitting there going, what is going on? Damn it! And the simple fact of the matter is that I adore Dane DeHaan. I do. But there were more than one time that I wanted to pimp slap Valerian. I was just like, you
wanted him to save a puppy. He saved a converter.
I realize that. But sir, I know James Kirk. James Kirk is a friend of mine.
No, he's not.
And you, sir,
you are not Lloyd Benson. Will you please stop?
And you, sir, are no James Kirk. I'm sorry. I have a very difficult time believing that this character is this, that he is, chased after by all these women, and, that he's got this enormous playlist of women that he's obviously, hit it and quit it. Because, and I'm not saying that because I don't think Dane DeHaan is attractive. I think Dane DeHaan is a very good-looking man. He's a very, Go ahead. He's quite handsome in this film.
So what's the difference between Valerian and James Bond? You don't have a problem with James Bond doing all that stuff. Yep, that's what I thought. Continue.
Because James doesn't come off as a smug a-hole.
Oh, yes, he does, especially in the Sean Connery era. Anyway, when it comes to women...
maybe that's why maybe that's why I kind of am preferring Daniel Craig's James Bond, because there are slivers of vulnerability.
There's more than slivers of vulnerability there.
And you don't get that with Valerian. I'm like, this guy, I know the charming rogue character is a standby and a staple of science fiction. I mean, everybody loves Han Solo, and that kind of a thing. And everybody loves a character like Captain Kirk, But this guy, no. I'm just, no. Carla Delevingne, who I just adore in everything, and I wish Suicide Squad had done a better job with Enchantress.
Yeah, she got the short shrift in that film, but for sure.
I'm sorry, the makeover they did with that character, I'm like, what the what? I was like, you know what? I'd rather have a movie with just her than with Valerian. I'm sorry. It's good. It's not perfect. And there was an enormous point at the end of the film that I had a problem with, but you actually fixed for me, so that's actually bumped things up a little bit. Mm-hmm. If you asked me for one word to describe this film, dizzying, that would be the word. Mm-hmm. What about you?
It's a good film. It's not perfect, and it has a lot of flaws, but I'll tell you something. The visual people on this movie deserve an Academy Award. This movie is so visually stunning, and I imagine it's that way in 2D too, but the 3D is the best I've seen in a long time for a movie, and it really immerses you, and I want to see if they can take that further into the 4D this Tuesday when it's on budget night. I'm going to go see it in 4D because they're playing it over here. Mm-hmm. I'm an enormous fan of Dane DeHaan's. I have been since Chronicle, and he keeps getting roles that he gets to play like, horrible, nasty people. Here, Valerian is kind of thoughtless, but he's a soldier. And they don't give you enough background. If you're not familiar with it, you might be thrown into the middle of this, and you have to figure things out for yourself. They don't give you the comic book backstory that Valerian is a by-the-book kind of guy, although he stretches the rules a little bit. And he actually picked up Cara Delevingne, character Laureline, in 977 when he had a time-traveling mission. She's from before the Magna Carta was issued. And then he had to bring her back history, and according to some of the books, it made Earth disappear, so somebody in her history had a big thing to do with Earth. But that being said, the story wrongly, because it is a French-made film, Luc Besson is familiar with it, it assumes that you should know everything there is to know about Valerian and Laureline going in. The problem is, American audiences do not know everything about Valerian and Laureline going in. And you have to figure out what's going on along the way. That having been said, the acting performances are fantastic. I think DeHaan hits it right on the nose with the way that the character is supposed to be portrayed. Some critics have called him wooden. I don't think so. I think that the character is that way. He's staid but not, he's not a very emotional guy. So we don't see that part of him, and that's why it comes off that way. Cara Delevingne is awesome, but let's be honest, unless you're going to see her, DeHaan, Clive Owen, or Chris Wu, you're only going to get 5 or 10 minutes of everybody else. You'll get 3 minutes of Rutger Hauer, about 3 minutes of Herbie Hancock, 5 or 6 minutes of Rihanna, and maybe 4 or 5 minutes of Ethan Hawke. Those are all cameos, basically. They play an important part in the story, but they're cameos. And so you're not going to be seeing them all the way through the film. If you're going in to see Rihanna, don't. It doesn't happen until almost 90 minutes into the film, and it only lasts for about 10 minutes. So don't, it's something that's integral to the plot, but, it could have been played by anybody. Rihanna's just there to get the kids in, supposedly. I liked it more than you did, I think, obviously, and I enjoyed it. I could figure it out, and the visuals were really great, and I was actually laughing at a number of places, and I don't think anybody else was getting the jokes, and that's sad. I was. I thought it was a stupendous-looking film. It's safe for families, and it's like, I mean, there's some destruction in it, but it's still relatively safe for families. And I just thought it was mesmerizing. What did you think? What's your score?
I give it a B-.
Yike. Okay. Any reasons?
I don't like the main character. I just don't. I'm sorry.
So this is your Guardians of the Galaxy.
Guess so.
I liked it better than you did, obviously. I think there's a lot of potential here. I hope the overseas audience carries it high enough to where they might actually consider a sequel, because the American audiences didn't go for it, and it's a shame. I think it's going to turn out to be an underrated film. And like Speed Racer a few years ago, in 10 years, people are going to be saying, you know, this movie is actually a lot better than we thought it was.
No,
I mean, there's no question about it. The critics love the visuals, but they don't particularly like the story or the acting. I don't agree. I think it fits perfectly, and I especially like the trio of duck things that are hopelessly in love with Laureline. I give Valerian and the City of 1,000 Planets an A-. Check it out in theaters everywhere. This weekend, it might be gone pretty soon. So that's just going to about do it for this week. We're going to, we've missed 2 segments that have been here all throughout the summer, and we will get them back next week. The 13 report, because we couldn't fit it in, this week's film, and our drive-in salute, which is what the show's all about, but we have an individual salute. I have to clarify a couple things from the salute, this week that I haven't been able to yet. So we're going to hold off. Missed the salute for the first time this summer.
Yeah.
But we're doing it for good reasons. And I want to make a big confession right now.
Oh, okay.
I'm not as good as I thought I was, and I'm heartbroken.
Should I be adding something here, a word of support? I don't know what I'm doing.
For many years, we have used a certain quote on this show.
Oh, that.
And this week, it came to my attention that we have been doing it wrong for 12 years now. There is a scene in Star Trek II where Kirk and McCoy are talking about Kirk flying a goddamn computer console, blah, blah, blah. And after McCoy gets done, Kirk turns to McCoy and says, or so we thought, "Don't mince words, Bones. How do you really feel?"
Yep.
And that's not the quote.
Nope.
And I'm absolutely heartbroken that we've been getting it wrong all these years. The actual quote is, "Don't mince words, Bones. What do you really think?"
Yeah. It's not a huge mistake. You know, it's not like everybody's screwing up the quote from Star Wars, which everybody screws up, except me. Everyone thinks it's Luke.
May the Force be with you? How do you screw that up?
The quote from Empire Strikes Back that everybody thinks is...
No, I am your father.
Yeah, which everybody seems to think is Luke, I am your father. I'm like, no, that's not right. So, it's not that big of a slip.
Well, it is for me. Because I don't do quotes well, and I thought it's the only one I ever got right, and I didn't. I was really upset when I found this out.
I know you were.
No, you don't know how upset I was.
I didn't tell it to you just to make you feel bad.
I know that. But it did upset me. And I feel terrible because I have this one and all of our friends who are so good at movie quotes, and I can't even get something simple like that right. It's terrible. So I'm swearing off movie quotes forever on this, just for the record. And I just wanted to make that confession that I screwed up from the very beginning. Because I admit my mistakes.
Yes, you do.
And that was the biggest, most egregious one of all, as far as I'm concerned. But we have other things that aren't mistakes, namely our other shows. 3 Minute Weekend and Tuesday Digidex are preview shows. 3 Minute Weekend for films, Tuesday Digidex for home video. They're mini shows lasting less than 10 minutes, and we hope you check them out. There's Cade Babble with Eric and Valerie Lyon, doing movies, games, TV, and other things, and we hope that you listen to that at cadebabble.com. There's Comic Grotto with Aunt B and Pee Wee, all about comics,
Mm-hmm.
plus comics as adapted for TV and movies.
Yep.
That's our newest show at comicgrotto.com. When I get around to it, there is Catastrophe Vortex, all about disaster movies from yours truly, catastrophevortex.com.
And when I get around to it, there will be a Platinum Roses Garden
Summer edition,
where I'm going to be looking at fanfic at platinumrosesgarden.com.
We've had problems getting the real recipe up too, which is our summer. It was supposed to be a miniseries. It's going to premiere in August.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to work our schedules out because we just can't seem to get the time to do it with everything else that we do. So it will premiere on the first Thursday in August, hopefully.
Yeah.
And I will have another special or two this week, plus all the Comic-Con coverage, trailers, and more, all every day at eastcinema1.com and eastcinemaboston.com. Please come over and check out the sites. East Cinema 1 for general news, East Cinema Boston for Boston-centric news. And, let us know what you think.
Mm-hmm.
Email us at subjectcinema@PNRNetworks.com. Be in touch on Twitter. I am PNR, what am I? I'm East Cinema Boston and East Cinema 1 on Twitter. You're Platinum Roselle.
And I'm Platinum Rose Lady at twitter.com. And if you'd like, you
and
can
we
also...
have Facebooks and all that stuff, too.
Yeah, and you can also check me out over on fanfiction.net. You can search for me in the author section under Platinum Rose Lady. You can find my fanfic over there from Supernatural and other places.
And be sure to take Subject Cinema with you with the Subject Cinema app. It gives you access to all of our shows, Subject Cinema, Front Row 5 and 10, and Real Rewind when it premieres, or Real Recipe. Not Real Rewind, that's still coming. And 3 Minute Weekend and Tuesday Digidex. You can download it from our website, click on the link in our show notes, and it's free.
Mm-hmm.
And be sure to tell your friends we're out there. We're out there as well. And if you go to a drive-in, and you have memories of the drive-in, we have a toll-free thing set up for you that you can do it on right on the internet. Go over to our subjectcinema.com website, our special summer site for the drive-in summer, and give us your comments. Use your Skype, use your phone, use that web address, and talk away for 5 minutes, and we will play it on the show, all about your memories of drive-ins.
Yep.
We're coming up on August, in our last month of drive-in summer.
Mm-hmm.
And we've also got our Rising Stars show, which has been moved to Labor Day this year because of problems over the 4th of July when we were both sick. And it's going to be a fun fall as well. We will be taking a break in early September for our vacation, but we will be back after that with the fall previews and all the coverage as the Oscar season ramps up.
Yep.
And we hope that you'll be there with us every step of the way. Until then... Subject Cinema's Drive-In Summer. I'm TC Kirkham.
I'm Kim Brown.
May your popcorn always be buttered.
And may your roses always be in bloom.
And we will see you at the drive-in.
Bye now.
You have been listening to Subject Cinema with hosts T.C. Kirkham and Kim Brown. Subject Cinema is produced by PNRNetworks, Boston, Massachusetts, which is solely responsible for its content. Subject Cinema is recorded and produced using Sony Vegas products. Subject Cinema is copyright 2017 by PNRNetworks under a Creative Commons license. Check out a new episode of Subject Cinema every weekend. Until next time, this is Bob Taylor for Subject Cinema, and we'll see you at the movies.
That's all.
Podcasting's choice. From coast to coast, continent to continent, right here 24/7.